Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to everybody today. As Carolina said, I'm Matt Hutchinson. I manage Baker Valley Vector Control District. We're a small district in Baker City, Oregon, out in Eastern Oregon. Size of our district is about 310 square miles, flood irrigated habitat, and flood irrigated pastures and hay meadows are our primary type of habitat in the district. We also have regular permanent water sources, ponds, sloughs, etc., things like that. And we do a little bit of storm drain work in Baker City itself. And so kind of just to give you guys a feel for it, all the red areas are flood irrigated pastures or hay fields in our district. So as you can see, we deal with quite a bit of it. Here's a few pictures of some of the typical habitat we see in Baker Valley. Like I said, lots of flood irrigated pastures, and it's important to keep up on it and keep up on our surveillance, because if we don't, something like this can happen. This was, I think, year 2 I was here, still kind of learning everything and learning the drill on things, and it was probably around 10,000 mosquitoes in that trap. Luckily, this doesn't happen too often. But it was in an area that we just missed and was wet and we didn't think it was supposed to be, and it highlights the importance of being on top of things. Types of mosquitoes that we deal with in our district: Aedes nigromaculus, deal with a lot of those. Also see a lot of Aedes dorsalis and Aedes vexans. It just kind of depends on the area of the district you're in. And then permanent water mosquitoes, I will mention Culex tarsalis, just as it's been pointed out in some of the other previous presentations. They will share the same habitat as those Aedes mosquitoes use if the water is going to be there long enough. We also do see some Culex pipiens, Culecida inornata, and Anopheles breborni, just in lesser numbers, but those are the prominent types of mosquitoes that we see in our district. So the challenges that we face, timing is definitely our biggest challenge. And timing of applications can be a challenge, especially from an aerial application standpoint, because we do contract out all our aerial work. We don't have our own planes, so there is a little bit of a scheduling portion to that. And so be it because of weather or schedule conflicts, sometimes when we really want to make that application, we can't make it happen for one reason or the other. So that is a definite challenge for us. And then also irrigation timing. It always seems to change year to year. Just when you think you have everybody figured out, somebody irrigates a little bit differently, and it kind of throws out of sync all of our plans. And so, so we kind of have to roll with the punches on that. And also access to habitat. Some areas are tough to get to. Weather, like I said before, can always be an issue, especially early spring and summer, when our weather can be often erratic around here. Cost, we always have to be conscious of cost. And then public opinion, both from environmentalist standpoint, people who are opposed to pesticides. Luckily, we don't have a lot of those types of people in my district. I'd say more often it's people who will call and ask if we can fly a plane in the next couple of days, when that's not quite how it works. And so sometimes those conversations can be fun. How we control floodwater mosquitoes: pretty much like everyone else, follow IPM principles, very heavy on the surveillance, both larval and adult surveillance, and then make those treatments as deemed necessary depending on our surveillance results. Products we use, lots of BTI for our floodwater irrigation sites, methoprene, and then also some Bacillus sphaericus. Usually that's some kind of a combo product with BTI when we use Bacillus sphaericus, but we do use that. As I have listed here, combo products, so BTI, Bacillus sphaericus, and then BTI and methoprene, and then some surface oils for pupa habitat. And then adulticides, use pyrethroid products for most of our ground-based applications. The type of pyrethroid depends on the type of application we're going to be making. And then organophosphates, we really don't use a lot of that, just dibrome for our aerial applications. So application methods. For larviciding from the ground, backpack applications, do quite a bit of those. And then we also use ATVs with fertilizer spreaders on the back. We have a couple of those, and we use those pretty extensively for our flood irrigated pastures and some of the haylands as well. And then from the air, fixed wing aircraft, like I said before, we contract out all our aerial work. And so, and then for adulticiding from the ground, we got truck mounted ULVs and ATV mounted ULVs. And then we also do some barrier spraying as well, and fixed wing aircraft from the air again. Just a few stats on the ground applications, usually 800 to 1,200 acres per year. That will fluctuate from year to year, sometimes more, sometimes less. But and the last couple years, we've been using mostly a BTI and methylprene combination product for our floodwater habitats. Adulticiding 15 to 20,000 acres per year in mostly pyrethroid products. And aerial operations, larviciding, we do about 8 to 10 applications per year for larvicide, 5,000 to 600 acres per year, and those have been primarily BTI applications. And adulticiding, we do 4 to 6 applications per year, and about 40 to 60,000 acres worth, and those are primarily dibrome applications. So mosquito control patterns is what I call it, and what I've done is I've broken down our area of our district into 3 different categories, and all of the areas are flooded on purpose for irrigation purposes, but it's done a little bit differently depending on the area of the district that you're in. And so I've broken it down into these 3 different categories. One, real technical term, I just call it the big flood, and the other ones are seasonal flooding and variable irrigation cycles, and I'll dive into each one of those in a little bit more detail here. So the big flood happens about 2 times throughout the summer, and in this area, very high peak mosquito numbers, and it's a lot of area to cover. This is where we do the majority of our aerial work, especially for the aerial larviciding. The aerial applications are highly effective, and the application timing in this area is very important. It's important in all areas, but this one in particular, because if we time it right, we can get really good control and really good results. So this graph on the side here, the yellow indicates where we're making our aerial larvicide applications. So we're making those applications when they start flood irrigating, and then the red indicates where we would hit it with an aerial adulticide application. And with this area, once we hit it with the aerial adulticide, if we time it right, then we can kind of just forget about it until they either flood it again or they're just done irrigating for the year in that area. So this slide, this just shows the area that we classify as the big flood. So they flood this whole area out in about a 2-week span, once around the end of May, and then again around the beginning of August. This area is much too vast for my small staff of field technicians. I hired 3 field technicians in the summer, so for them to keep up with this and everything else that's going on in the district would be too much. So this is where we utilize our aerial applications. And like I said, this is probably one of the worst areas, can be one of the worst areas for mosquitoes in our district. But it is one of the easier areas to control because the irrigation cycles are very cyclical, and it's pretty predictable of when they're going to do it and all that. And so we can time everything up pretty well most of the time and get good control results out in this area. So the next one I call seasonal flooding, and it's seasonal in the fact that there's a lot of free flow irrigation. So they kind of take the water when it's available and irrigate these areas. So this is typically one of the first areas to flood in our district. These irrigation cycles are pretty dependent on snowpacks and also just the spring weather, how wet of a spring it is. Usually starts to dry out by August. So that'll fluctuate from year to year depending on how wet the spring is and how much snowpack we had. But usually if we have to do an aerial application out here, we'll hit it mid to late June, and then the rest of the time we can keep up with everything pretty well with ground-based larviciding as well as adulticiding if necessary, and then it starts to taper off around the first part of August, middle of August. And then the third cycle is variable irrigation cycles. And this is probably the hardest type of habitat or areas to control in our district because the irrigation patterns are often pretty erratic, and it makes control pretty difficult. So we have to just constantly be searching the district and checking for water, because guys will irrigate several times, 4 or 5 times throughout the summer, and kind of just when the water's there. And so it's tough to really time and sync these areas up. And so we just have to do a lot of surveillance in these areas and keep an eye on it. Some years can be much worse than others. Just kind of depends on the water year, type of water rights guys have, and how much water is available for them to use. Sometimes we will make aerial adulticide applications in these areas if 80s numbers are high enough, or if there's West Nile virus present in these areas. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll just kind of tack on that to a different aerial application that we're making if numbers dictate that we need to do so. So why have we been using BTI and methylprin combo formulation? I just want to talk about this a little bit because it's been pretty helpful for us. And so sometimes in our district, some of the sites take so long to flood. There's a wide variety of instars found in these sites. So by using a BTI methylprin combo product, it's allowed us to have more control over 1st through 4th instar larvae. And so we can potentially treat a site all at once instead of having to make multiple trips to the same area. So saves us time, saves time having to send field technicians out multiple times to one spot, and it's less intrusive. Some areas we try not to drive around with our 4-wheelers making treatments more than we need to. And so if we can just do it once and be in and out, that's very beneficial to both us and the landowner. The reason we kind of went to this is because of our field trial that we did in 2017. We did a ground trial of Vectoprime FG, treated about 40 acres, 3.5 pounds per acre, targeted 80s larvae, 2nd through 4th instar. And application method was one of our Fimco fertilizer spreaders on an ATV. Results, we had greater than 90% larval reduction at 48 hours post-treatment. So that's kind of what instigated us to start using this product more thoroughly in our district. Potential trials this year, we're talking about doing an aerial application of Vectoprime with a similar rate as the previous trial, targeting the same stages of larvae, same type of larvae, just basically from the air, and to see how that works out and if that could be a potential use for us in the future. So that's my presentation. Thank you everybody for listening, and if anybody's got any questions, I think we got a little bit of time to hear those.